Now, isn't it amazing that old former chairman Ben Bernanke of the Federal Reserve is now saying that helicopter money might be a good thing? Ben Bernanke, according to MarketWatch, Ben Bernanke says so-called helicopter money could work. Really. Former Fed Chair Ben Bernanke earned the nickname Helicopter Ben for a speech in which he cited Milton Friedman's imagery of dropping money from the sky in a fight against deflation. Now Ben Bernanke is taking on the concept that's becoming more popular in economic circles, so-called helicopter money. That refers to either a tax cut or public spending being financed by a permanent increase in the money supply. So, speaking of that, Thomas Jefferson quotes, first by inflation. That's what we wanted. Wow. I actually found this on Forbes. No kidding. Forbes? You actually put this in here. 2011, November 6th. So let's figure out what Jefferson said first. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. He wrote, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around these banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. First by inflation, then by deflation. Back to the article. We repeat that last paragraph. Now Bernanke is taking on the concept that's becoming more popular in economic circles, so-called helicopter money. That refers to either a tax cut or public spending being financed by a permanent increase in the money supply. The first sentence, or should start at the first paragraph. Former Fed Chair Ben Bernanke earned the nickname Helicopter Ben for a speech in which he cited Milton Friedman's imagery of dropping money from the sky in the fight against deflation. So if it's first by inflation by these private banks, we have one, it's called the Federal Reserve. They create inflation, and then to combat inflation, they create deflation. It says right here, for a speech in which he cited Milton Friedman's imagery of dropping money from the sky in a fight against deflation. Let's just flood the world with money, or in our country especially, with money. But Thomas Jefferson said, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around these banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. So we've had inflation. You still could say we do. But yeah, but gas prices finally dropped. Okay, for now. That's one thing that's dropped. Now we're trying to combat deflation. Bernanke, in a blog post in his current role at the Brookings Institution, it's not amazing. Amazing that he got a job there, of course. Says there are a number of factors standing in the way of helicopter money, or as he likes to call it, a money-financed fiscal program. What if that's like TARP funds, Troubled Asset Relief Program? Sounds good. Money-financed fiscal program. He also says there's no need for such stimulus now, but Bernanke also sees a role for helicopter money. Quote, under certain extreme circumstances, sharply deficient aggregate demand, exhausted monetary policy, in other words, no more tools in the Fed's toolbox, as they say, and unwillingness of the legislature to use debt-financed fiscal policies, which they will stop doing. Such programs may be in the best, or may be the best available alternative. It would be premature to rule them out, he says. That said, he does see a number of obstacles. One is simply the legality. So-called people's QE, or, we had QE, quantitative easing 1, quantitative easing 2, quantitative easing 3, and then technically a quantitative easing 4. And then they stopped. Remember how $80 billion a month? Remember that one? We're spending $80 billion a month. The Fed is purchasing these mortgage-backed security garbage from the banks. $80 billion a month. But we don't have the funding to keep Social Security going for too much longer, and we don't have funding for Medicaid and Medicare, and we don't have funding for food stamps. We're going to have to start cutting those people up. $80 billion a month. Can't seem to find the money, though. So now you may have heard a few whispers of people's QE starting in Europe. Wait, we've bailed out the banks, we've flooded everywhere else with money, now let's flood the people with money. That way, when they flood the people with money, and then they crash everything because of massive problems that's going to create, then they can put you and I to blame too. Well, we realized we gave QE to the banks, but then we gave it to you guys too, and now we're realizing that both of those instances weren't good decisions, but you participated. No, actually we didn't. You just gave it to us. Kind of like you just gave it to the banks. Do I really see a people's quantitative easing coming? That would literally mean giving you cash in your bank account. You wake up one day and there's, $10,000 extra dollars in there or something, for every person in the country. I don't even see how they would even do that. But one is the simple legality. So-called people's QE has been advocated for by UK Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn. Would be illegal in most or all jurisdictions, Bernanke points out. That would involve the central bank printing money and giving it away. Isn't that what you did, pretty much? Same with TARP funds. Your balance sheet is trillions of dollars now, when it shouldn't be like hardly anything. That money went somewhere, right? Money does not disappear. It goes somewhere. Someone got that money. There's also the practical worry that central banks don't target money supply but a short-term interest rate. Bernanke suggests that to implement helicopter money, the central bank could temporarily raise its inflation objective, since the price level and the money supply tend to be proportional in the longer run, aiming for a higher price level could approximate the effects of committing to a higher money supply. Bernanke says another concern is governance and the temptation to use helicopter money when the economy isn't struggling. He says a way around this is to create the legal framework in advance that the Treasury would have a special account at the Fed that would remain unfilled unless the Federal Open Market Committee said it would be necessary to achieve employment and inflation goals. Well, hold on a second. I just read that we've had the best unemployment number since 1976 or something, or 73, somewhere around there. 1970s, mid-1970s, we now have that. That's been that long ago since we've had these grade of unemployment numbers, which is false. So if all the data that gets to tell you, okay, it's time for QE for the people, the data said, oh, wait a minute, they manipulate that data, so it never says that. So you never get the QE bailout for the people, because they'll just say, look, there's unemployment charts look great. And it's the FOMC, Federal Reserve Committee, that decides, based off of our data, when we do this or not. Well, hold on. You're a privately owned entity making decisions for the entire country. Let me say this one more time. Thomas Jefferson. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around these banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. He also wrote, the issuing power of currency shall be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. We should, and then this guy says this guy who wrote this article for Forbes, Robert Lenzner, we should all meditate on that amazing prediction of things to come that are not necessarily beneficial to the 99%, but only to the 1%. And he wrote that back in November 6, 2011. Man, is that even more, I don't even know, more current today than it was in 2011, I guess I should say. So, finalize this piece. He says, Bernanke says, this arrangement would effectively leave the Fed the responsibility of conducting the technical analysis of whether an MFFP is needed to achieve the Fed's mandated goals and of determining the corresponding amount of money to be created. Once again, you allow the Federal Reserve privately owned bank to issue a country's currency and then maintain control over when they can issue any kind of quantitative easing without congressional approval. Just leave it up to the Fed. Again, through their, as he says, technical analysis will be left up to them. And their technical analysis right now says everything is fantastic. Barack Obama said you're peddling fiction if you think otherwise. Jobless numbers, fantastic. Unemployment, fantastic. How many people are still on food stamps? Oh, that's right, near 50 million. Record numbers. How many people are out of the job force, not looking for jobs anymore, who they don't count in their analysis? Somewhere around 90 million or something like that. Again, it's exactly what Thomas Jefferson said. We cannot allow a privately owned bank to issue the freaking country's monetary supply. It was also Lord Rothschild who said back in the day, give me the power, what was the saying? Give me the power to print a country's currency, and I care not who makes its laws. Something along those lines. Give me control of a nation's currency, and I care not who makes its laws. Do we have that today? We sure as hell do. Federal Reserve. Almost hard to believe. Take care.